I'm Layne, Caterpillar's Waste Application Specialist, and today we're going to talk about the daily maintenance inspection on this 966XE. Now, the 966XE is a little bit different than the normal wheel loader. Big difference being it is a CVT transmission, which is basically like a high stat and a mechanical drive transmission all in one. So, same outside inspection, getting started. However, a little bit different operating procedures from inside the cab and in the transfer station. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get up into the cab. But first, let's just talk about walk-around inspections. Why do we do them? Well, once again, why do we do them? Safety being number one. I want to catch a problem, something small, whether it's a problem with my brake system, whether it's a problem with the hydraulics, maybe a small leak, something along those lines, but I want to catch that before it becomes a major safety issue, right? Also, to prolong the life of the machine. Once again, going back to that catching a problem when it's small, a small leak before it becomes a major leak is going to help prolong the life of that machine. So those are the two major reasons why we do our daily walk-around inspections. Now, how many times a day do I do the walk-around inspection? Well, I do it at the start of shift. I'm going to do it at the end of shift. And I'm also going to do it anytime I get on and off that machine. And as far as anytime I get on and off that machine, that is just simply doing a quick 360 walk-around to ensure that nobody is over on the other side of the machine, maybe in that blind spot from when I sit in the operator station, or it gives me a good opportunity to kind of look around and make sure I don't have any fluids or any major leaks that have occurred from the time I started the machine till at that point where I'm at right now in that part of the day. So, start of shift, end of shift, and anytime I get on or off the machine. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on our walk around for this 966XE. Now, for those of you who've seen a lot of my walk around videos, you'll know, starting off, first thing I want to do before I get going, I'm going to claim my machine. Claiming my machine means I'm going to walk over, I'm going to pop open the ground level service center, and I'm going to shut the disconnect switch off, and I'm going to pull that key out. I'm going to keep that key right here in my pocket. And what that does is that's going to keep anybody from climbing up in the cab and think they're going to take off in that machine, because I could be over on that other side in that articulation area doing my inspection. I don't want anybody firing that machine up. So we'll go ahead and take the key out and get started. So once again, for those of you who've seen a lot of my videos, you probably remember I'm left-handed. So I like starting at the left front. I don't care where you start your walk-around inspection. However, I just ask that you do it in the same place, start at the same place every time. So whether it's the rear of the machine, whether it's the other side, whether it's this side, doesn't matter. Just start there at the same place every time. Make it a routine. That way you can do a quick, efficient walk-around inspection into that 10, 15-minute window and make sure that you still touch and cover every vital component of that machine. So we're going to step inside here, and I'm going to start looking inside this wheel loader. I'm going to look inside my linkage. I'm going to be looking at pins. I'm going to be looking at bolts. I'm going to make sure that all the bolts are in place. All my pin keepers are in place that hold my pins in. I'm also going to look up there at my tilt cylinder. I want to make sure I don't have any damage to that tilt cylinder on that cylinder. I don't want any pitting. I don't want any gouging, no scratches. Also, I want to make sure I don't have a lot of dust and debris built up around that dust boot. Because once again, we've talked about many a times, as dust builds up around that dust boot, and every time that cylinder goes in, it takes a little bit with it. And at some point, I start contaminating my hydraulic system. I possibly start getting a leak around that dust boot with a lot of that debris built up. So I want to keep it clean. I want to keep an eye on it. I want to make sure I don't have any leaks there, okay? Once again, looking inside, I'm going to look in between my tires and on my axle. Make sure I don't have any debris or anything loose, out of place there. I'm going to look at my lift cylinders. Once again, make sure the bolts are tight. Make sure the pin keepers are in place and the pins are in place, okay? I'm also going to start looking at all my hoses inside there. Now, we do a really good job of trying to block everything off to where trash and debris cannot get inside there. But I still want to keep an eye and look and make sure that all those vital components are protected. So I'm going to look at my hoses, make sure I don't have any leaks. I'm also going to look at this beautiful yellow paint and make sure I don't have any black marks, for example, that might be rubbed on that beautiful yellow paint. If I see some black marks on that paint, could be a good indication I got a hydraulic line that's rubbing on there. And what's going to happen is, as that continues to rub, it's eventually going to start to wear through. And then we're eventually going to end up with a problem. That could be a safety issue. It could be a maintenance issue. Could be both. But once again, I'm going to look for that. Also, on this beautiful yellow paint, I'm going to look for if I see any cracked or spider web paint. It's usually a good indication to me as well that, you know, we've got maybe into some structural damage and something twisted and it caused that paint to crack or spider web out. So that's going to draw my attention to it. Also, as I stand on this side, I got a good line of sight now as everything's cleaned and not piled up with trash or debris. I can look on the inside of my wheel over there on that other side of the machine, and it gives me a good line of sight to see if anything's happening or anything out of the ordinary there as well. So I've looked at everything inside. I've looked at my bolts. I've looked at my pins. I'm going to look down here at my dog bone and my linkage going to my bucket and my bucket pins. I want to make sure everything's tight, in place. I want to make sure my grease zerks are not broke and they're still serviceable so I can grease this machine when it calls for the proper time to grease the machine per the OMM. Now we'll turn around and we'll work our way out and we'll look at the back side of this trash bucket. Once again, I'm looking at welds. I want to make sure I don't have any cracked welds. I'm looking at the trash rack. I'm looking at where the trash rack is welded to the bucket and a couple of things with the welds. If I see a cracked weld, that's number one. That's a good indication I got a crack. But maybe I don't see the crack, but I see some rust on that weld. It's going to draw my attention to it and say, okay, I'm getting some moisture in there. I possibly have a crack. We got to investigate it a little bit further. So I'm going to look at the back side here. I'm going to work my way out. I'm going to look at the bucket on the side. Now I'm going to turn around and we're going to go at the machine and start with the tire. Once again, I'm going to check the overall condition of the tires. I'm going to look at the bolts. I'm going to look at the lock ring, make sure that that keeper's in place. The lock ring is on there. Now, something that's going to draw my attention to this particular machine right now. I look down here. I do not see the valve stem for this tire. So I'm probably going to write that up because I got no way to put air in there. Actually, I'm just kidding. These are solid tires. They're not pneumatic, so I don't have a valve stem. So, but one thing, thinking about pneumatic tires is until I know what's going on with that tire, I never want to approach a tire directly in front. I do want to get in the habit of coming up at a 45-degree angle and staying off to the side until I know that there's nothing wrong with this tire if it's a pneumatic to where it could have a tire explosion. Because if it were to have a tire explosion and I'm standing in front, this lock ring is going to come flying out, and it could fly out up to 1,500 feet. So you think about if I'm standing in front of that, it makes for a very, very bad day. So once again, until we know what's going on with it, if it's a pneumatic tire, approach it from a 45, okay? But once again, I want to look, make sure I don't have any gouges. Like I said, these are solid tires. This is what we run in a waste application just because of the many things that are going to be on the floor. We don't want them puncturing and causing flat tires. I'm going to check the overall condition of the tire. I'm going to look at those bolts. I'm going to look at the lock ring. I'm going to look at the keeper, make sure everything's in place, okay? Now we'll work our way around. Starting to get into this area. Number one, looking at our fenders, looking at it from a safety standpoint. You'll notice with this, these fenders are recessed in behind the tire. So this is a good safety feature because it's going to allow me to get close to an object and I don't have to worry about anything getting over and grabbing the fender and ripping the fender off. Steel fender. So once again, rough environment. We've always said waste is the harshest environment that I could put a piece of equipment in. So anything we can do to protect that. So we have steel fenders on there. As you can see right here, I got my wheel chocks. So if I stop that machine and I need to chalk the wheels at night, very easily pull this out. I got a keeper right here though to pull that out, put the wheel chalk in place. Now, I'm also going to look over as well and look at my step. We talked a lot on our equipment with the steps, especially in the waste environment. We've always said in any of the applications, but 75% of all injuries to an operator are simply from getting on and off the machine and being on that equipment. So a lot of our steps, especially on the waste side, are going to have that rigid design up top. So when I step, I've got a solid footing in there that's going to keep me from sliding. Also, when we talk about safety, we'll come back out here real quick. And I look at my lights. All my lights on this wheel loader have some type of guarding in the front of them to keep stuff from flying in and breaking those lights. So we've got good visibility and people can see us when we're in that environment. Now, as we come back in, some of the things I'm looking for. Once again, we're looking at the hoses. We're looking inside this center articulation area. And we're going to make sure that our cab mounts are tight any of the bolts are tight. I want to make sure I don't have any debris built up around my drive shaft that's inside. I want to make sure I don't have any debris or any damage inside the lower articulation area or up top into the center articulation area on the upper articulation. All my hoses, I've got a lot of hoses running through here. They are protected, but once again, debris could get in there, cause some damage to those hoses. So I want to look at those hoses and I want to look at leaks. Make sure I don't have any leaks happening inside there. Another thing when we talk about leaks, as the operator, as I'm walking around, if I see a spot that has just a bunch of dust built up in it and nothing else around it, good indication I've got a leak somewhere. That's some type of fluid that's hitting that machine and then that dust is sticking to it. So that's going to, once again, draw me to that as I'm doing that inspection to say, okay, what's going on right here? Now, a couple other things inside here. Once again, you can see the extra guarding. From a safety standpoint, we're trying to protect those vital components of this machine. But I can look inside here, and when we look at safety, I've got this red dog bone underneath. I want to make sure that's part of my inspection because this is going to spin around. I pull this pin right here. This is going to spin out. It's going to latch on right in here. And I'm going to drop the pin in there, and that's going to keep this machine from articulating. It's good for transport. It's also good if the mechanic happens to be in there doing some work and he needs the machine running. He can lock that out. We don't have to worry about any energy hitting it and possibly articulating. Okay, and once again, I want to look inside here. I can see my sight glass for my transmission fluid, and it gives me a good line of sight that I can see and tells me where we should be. Well, what we need to make sure of is, once again, as we've done with all of our CAT equipment, some have a cold start area for the fluid. Some have a hot running area also for the fluid. So make sure we're looking at the right side, whether it's a double-sided dipstick, whether it's the sight glass. It has two different spots in it depending on hot or cold check. Okay, so make sure we're looking at the right area. Now, we've looked at everything inside there. I'll work my way out. Here's my fill tube for my transmission. We got it protected. We got the tube protected here. Also, right here, it's got a sticker. And on this sticker, it's got a transmission gear and it's got an oil drop. That tells me it's transmission oil, going from my ISO symbols and how they're built. That's transmission oil, and then also it's telling me how to properly check that. It's referring to the OMM to learn how to properly check the transmission oil. Okay, we'll work our way out. Now, let's just go ahead and open this up right here. This is our ground level service center. Inside this ground level service center is a couple of things happening. Number one, it's our disconnect switch. We already saw I pulled the key out. We have our master key that goes in there. Right here is my jumper receptacle. Do a jump start, easy hookup for the battery cables. We have lights, and then this switch right here, and this is to raise the cab. Once again, we'll demonstrate that once we put the key back in and turn the power on, okay? Here's my emergency shutoff switch. So if I don't want to get inside the cab to shut the machine down, say I got a fire, say I've got fluids pouring out, you can flip that up, flip that switch, and kill the fuel to that machine and shut that machine down. Now let's continue on talking a little bit about safety. A lot of handles on there and handhelds. They're going to be solid and bolted on, allow easy access onto the machine. Also, when I look at this wheel loader and these steps, we got the rigid design right here on top. Gives me a good bite when I put my foot in there. It's nice and wide, so I can get a full foot on there. But you also look here and how it's angled. It's angled out to allow me good climbing up into that cab and make it easier for me to climb up in there. Also, we've got the cable right here and we got this bottom step. This is because we're running over a lot of stuff inside the transfer station, and it's a crazy environment with the amount of stuff that comes in. It could be 2x4s, it could be chunks of concrete, it could be straight MSW waste, whatever it is, but we're running over a lot of stuff. So this is designed for us if we do run over it and I hit something here, I might hit it. That's going to shake back and forth, but it's not going to break that step, okay? So, want to keep an eye on it, make sure the bolts are tight, but if it does happen to break, very easily replace that whole bottom step and not necessarily have to replace the whole ladder as well. All right, good stuff. Once again, here I'm going to be looking, make sure my handholds are tight in place. I'm going to step back. I'm going to look. Right up there, I can see my washer fluid tank for my window, so I want to keep my windows clean. Also from right here, from looking at the ground, I can see my sight glass for my hydraulic fluid. So once again, because of the machine and the type of environment we're in, we want to minimize how much we're climbing on and off that machine. So now putting everything down from a ground level, and being able to look at my fluids from a ground level makes it a lot safer for me as the operator, so I'm not climbing up and down that machine. So once again, I can see that fluids look good. Same inspection on the tire, on the bolts, clip for the lock ring, and then inside this area right here, make sure there's nothing broke, out of place. I've got some drain tubes hanging down. I want to make sure they're not damaged. And then I want to work myself back. I want to, once again, here's my step. It's got the rigid design on top. Gives me a good bite. Same thing with the bottom step with the cable on there. Now, I also want to look at my fire suppression right here. We want to make sure we've got this keeper on here that is tied on to hold this clip into place. You can see how it's clipped in. Here's the tag that it's been serviced. Here's another tag to show it's holding that keeper in. If this is broke, this clip will work itself out. And then if I hit a bump, it will set off the fire suppression. So we want to make sure that this is part of our daily inspection, and then we're inspecting the fire suppression. Now I'm going to open up this compartment here. A lot's happening inside here, okay? Number one, I've got DEF. DEF, we said, is easily contaminated. So any dust or debris that gets in that DEF as I'm filling it or into that tank is going to cause some problems with the CAT emissions module, because it will give me an alarm and it will cause problems with that system because of the dirty DEF. Want to make sure we're wiping it off, keeping it clean when we add in there. It's also, once again, it's got the sticker on there that tells me how much to put in per where it's at on the gauge. This says here, if it's a half a tank on the gauge in the cab, it's going to take 3.4 gallons to fill that DEF tank. Now, what I would do there, whether we're using the 2.5 gallon jugs, I'd put one 2.5 gallon jug in and leave it till the next time that I can put a full jug in. The important thing there is we just want to make sure we can put a full jug in each time if that's what we're using. Also, this is telling me that if I leave the key on and I fill it up, it's going to buzz the horn at me one time when it's full, okay? I've got my diesel tank right behind it. I have my engine oil fill right there up on top. And then also I have my dipstick for my engine oil right inside. So once again, as we look, so this one we need to watch, because unlike the other ones, this is single-sided. So this is a cold oil check. There is no hot check. So our engine oil should always be checked when the engine is cold and sitting and not running, okay? Make sure we're aware of that. If I've got a question about that, where can I find it? Well, I can find it in that OMM. Okay. All right. Now this is where I'm going to step back. This gives me good line of sight to look up top, look at my mirrors, look at my lights, look at the fire extinguisher that's out on top. I'll check that out as I climb up to get into the cab. But once again, I can see it, make sure everything doesn't look out of place as I'm working myself around. Now we'll work our way to the back of the machine. Okay, so as you've seen, we were able to check the oil, add DEF, add diesel fuel, check our hydraulic, and do everything from the ground level without having to open the hood. I still like to open the hood just to be able to look inside the engine compartment, make sure there's nothing out of the ordinary, nothing leaking inside, make sure there's no debris. But before I open the hood, I do need to come over and open the trash rack. We're going to pull the pin. I'm going to open this trash rack, because if I don't open the trash rack and I go to open the hood, then I could do damage to the hood as I were to start raising it with that trash rack down. So very important before we raise the hood, make sure we open the trash rack. Now, while I'm down below here as well, before we get going, I'm going to go ahead and open up this the radiator compartment. And as you can see, we made it very easy to open. So once again, I want to keep the area back here clean. So very easily to open, blow it out, or hose it off, whatever the case may be if something were to build up. Then I'm going to reach up, I'm going to grab the handle. Now I can pull this section out as well. This gives me great line of sight to be either clean these or get inside and clean the radiator and blow either one of them out, remove any debris that might be built up. So very easily to access, very easy to keep clean and keep that machine running the best that we can. Now we're going to go ahead and close that. Now I want to go ahead and raise the hood. So we're going to go ahead and put the master key in, get some power going to the machine. So the hood is this switch right here. All right, we'll hold that there for now. So I'm going to come back over here to the back. And so once again, the hood is raised. This gives me a great opportunity to look up top, see my CAT emissions module, make sure there's nothing out of place, any of the bolts are tight, any of that stuff, the heat shields are all in place. And then I can pull this down and look inside and see if there's any debris or dust or anything built up that might need to be removed. Right inside here as well as we also have the quick evac where we can hook up and pull the engine oil out. And it's just sitting right inside this panel here. But being able to have that good line of sight to look inside and make sure there's nothing out of the ordinary inside that engine compartment is a real benefit for prolonging the life of this machine and being able to remove that debris and help prevent fires as well. So we'll put this back up. So this is a good opportunity. Now I come around, I got the hood enclosure open. I've looked in the engine compartment. I work my way back. I can inspect my lights back here in the back of the hood enclosure. I can look for any damage. This is a good spot too where I can come over, look down underneath, make sure I don't have any leaks or anything happening underneath the machine, number one. Also, this is where I can see any of my bolts, make sure the bolts on my counterweight are tight and they're not loose or sticking out further. And then I also want to make sure that my pin is in place. Once again, we might get into a situation where a truck is broke down or something along those lines and we got to, pull it out of the way or get it out of the way. We've got a pin here, put our chains in place to be able to pull things as well. We'll kind of check these on this side as well, and then also be able to look across at that other tire in that area there to make sure I don't have any leaks coming down. Now as we come around, good spot to check, make sure my guard's in place. I've got guarding over my lights. That's a good safety feature so our lights don't get damaged. And then I'm looking inside the compartment here. Okay, got our fuel water separator. I've got a hose coming down so I can open that up, drain some of that water out on that fuel water separator, make sure we got a bucket underneath to catch any of that fuel and water. Once again, I want to look at these hoses and make sure that none of them are leaking or anything. And then I'm going to pull this panel down, drop it down, and that gives me good line of sight. I'm looking right down inside my engine compartment once again, make sure I don't have any leaks, make sure I don't have any debris or anything broken or out of place there, okay? We'll go ahead and put that panel back up. Clipper in place. Now, I'm looking on the inside here, make sure there's no damage. I'm also looking up top. And that's where I can see my lights, make sure my guarding's in place. I can see my speaker for my backup alarm, as well as I got my beacon there for my light as well, from a safety feature. We're gonna, once again, inspect the tire. I'm gonna inspect the lock ring, the clip. I wanna look at the bolts. Another little trick of the trade as well when we talk about the bolts on the tire. And as you saw me going around, you don't see me reaching in and grabbing each individual bolt to make sure they're tight. So a couple of things that I'd look for. Number one, if I have a lot of debris built up around a bolt, but I got one that doesn't have anything, probably draws my attention to it to say, hey, I got something going on there. Maybe that bolt is loose. Also, if I see anything shiny, like shiny chrome or whatever, that's a good indication I got something loose because that washer behind there is rolling around and maybe rubbing against that bolt. So that's going to draw my attention. Or if I see streaks of rust coming down from one of those bolts, that means I'm getting moisture behind there. So that's a good indication that I got something loose right there. So that's what I'm looking for when I do that tire inspection as I come around. So once again, looking for anything, any gouges or anything ripped out of that tire, something that's not right. I'm going to look at wear. Wear is very important on the tires, especially in this application. Now, a couple things I'm going to look for here. Once again, very important. All of our handhelds allows me to properly climb this machine, utilizing 3 points of contact and not get hurt as I climb up or climb down off that machine. Looking at our steps, just like on the other side, I got a bit of a pitch here. Gives me good, easy access to climb up onto the step here. So if I wanted to get up into this area and check out my cabin filtration system and the filters there, I can get up top, pull those out. I can also got good line of sight to see my fire suppression tank right here, and I'm looking directly right at that gauge to where I can see the needle that's in the green zone that tells me, hey, that system's okay right there. That tank is okay and good to go. I want to make sure I'm looking at those. Now, another thing that I want to really look at and pay attention to, our little racetrack sticker that I like to call it. And basically what this is this has got lines going all the way around. And on those lines, it's either telling me that it's a grease zerk, or this says a hydraulic oil filter or engine coolant. So it's basically telling me where all of my fluid checks are. It's also telling me where all my service points are, my zerks, right? And these lines going around are basically set up on hours, 10, 20, 30, 50, etc. It's telling me how often I should be greasing each one of those service points, and it's going to tell me how often I should be checking and where I should check those fluids. This one here shows 10 hours. It's basically telling me every day I should be checking the backup alarm on this machine. So that's a daily check. Once again, want to make sure we keep an eye on that. We follow that. Make sure that if it does get ripped off and torn, make sure we get that replaced. It's very important for this piece of equipment. So once again, the handhelds, hoses, coming inside, cab mounts, making sure they're tight. I'm looking at these steering cylinders, making sure the zerks are in place and I can still service them. Right down inside the compartment here, once again, I have all this skirting, the guarding all around here to try to keep stuff out, but stuff still could get in there, so I want to be able to look inside and make sure I don't have any debris or any garbage built up. Looking at my hoses on this side, once again, looking up at my windows, my mirrors, anything in that area there that could possibly have a leak or any type of damage. Bolts, pin keepers, all that in place. These hoses, and then working our way back out from the fender, working my way back out to the tire, looking for any gouges out of the tires, looking at those bolts. Once again, making sure the lock ring keeper is locked and in place. And now I'm going to walk in here and I'm going to step. So a couple things from this area, just like on the other side. Number one, I got good line of sight up to the top of my cab. I've got the halo going around the cab. That allows me a good area to either tie off to or hold on to if I'm up on that platform. Or if I were to get up on this platform in the front and where I got to clean the window, I can tie off, I can step right there. I can see that my guards are over my lights. That's going to protect those lights. Now I'm going to step inside here. This gives me good line of sight to see across, see if anything's in the area on that far side. Also to be able to look in here at my lift cylinders, at my axles, at my bolts on my differentials, make sure I don't have any leaks coming out around that diff. Hoses, pin keepers, everything else I've been looking at throughout the course of this daily walk-around inspection. Now I'm going to look on this side of the dog bone and looking at the zerks, pin keepers, and on my bucket linkage as well when I come down and look at those bucket pins. Zerks, you can see I got a zerk right here. I want to keep an eye on that and make sure nothing gets in there and breaks that off. So I've always got a service point there to service that, that particular area. Then I'll turn around, I'll look at this back side of the bucket. Once again, looking for cracked welds, looking at the trash rack, looking for any cracks on the welds or any structural damage or any damage to that trash rack. All right, now we'll come around. I'm gonna work myself back around the side of the bucket. Once again, looking at any type of structural damage, whether it's cracked welds or anything like that. And then also, just kind of want to point out something to look at as well, just a little trick of the trade. When I'm up inside the cab of this machine, if I ever want to know where my cutting edge is and how it's setting on the ground, this spot right here is parallel with my cutting edge. So this is always a good reference point from inside the cab and looking down to be able to tell what's happening with the cutting edge down on the ground because of the position right here. So just get a little trick of the trade. Now, I'll work myself around, come around to the front. Some of the things that I'm looking for in the front, once again, trash rack, any of the welds, cracked. I want to make sure they're not cracked. The bucket, I want to make sure I don't have any cracks or structural damage to the bucket. I want to look at my bolts and make sure all my bolts look normal and are in place and are tight for the cutting edge. I'm also going to look at the condition of the cutting edge and make sure it's not wore. I also want to look at the angle of the cutting edge and how it's wearing. And looking at that angle, whether I'm the everyday operator or supervisor, but looking at that angle is a good indication as to how we're utilizing that bucket on the transfer station floor. And if we get too aggressive of an angle or we put too much down pressure down, Once again, we could wear out anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of concrete, wear that down in a year because of an aggressive angle. So we want to try to minimize our angle. And those are some best practices when you go over from my operational standpoint. That's what's going to draw my attention, though, to just kind of look at that and see how that cutting edge is wearing, whether it's steel or whether it's the rubber cutting edge, okay? I'll look at my bolts coming all the way across. I'll look at even wear, and then we'll write it up. So, for example, on this particular one right here, I can see, I'm wore out underneath. We can see how it's kind of coming back through here. So I would write this up and say, this cutting edge needs to be replaced. It would be one thing I would write up on my walk-around inspection, that it's time to get a new cutting edge on here and get that going. But then I'll look at the trash rack again, work my way across on the back side of the bucket here, and then end up where I started. Okay, so that concludes my daily walk-around inspection on this 966XE. So now we're going to go ahead. We finished. We're going to walk over. I want to go ahead and bring the hood down and then walk over and close the trash rack. Then we'll be ready to get inside the cab and go move some trash. Okay, we've closed the hood, we secured the trash rack, and we closed that. Now, it's time to go to work. Okay, we need to get out in the trash. We need to start loading some trucks. So, now, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my button here. Now, that's what I call service. Opens the door for me. Why is that important? It seems relatively minor. Once again, when we talk about the injuries to an operator, and 75% of them being simply from getting on and off that machine. So we think about this right here, where I can hit the button and it opens the door. Normally, I would have to climb up utilizing 3 points of contact, and that's what we're going to do right now because we're going to go to work. But just kind of want to illustrate, I would have to climb up, hit on a couple of steps, and then reach over, grab the handle, pull the door open, and then I got to kind of lean back as that door were to open. So that's why that as a safety feature is so important on this wheel loader. Now, I no longer have to stand there and wait for that door to open and pull that door open to where I possibly risk, slipping and falling off the back of that ladder. So, thank you, and I'm going to go play in the trash. Now we're going to come in, get ready to do our cab inspection, get ready to work. First things first, though, I'm going to take my hard hat off. I'm going to secure that in the spot behind the seat. We'll shut our door. Now I want to get up, reach around, and want to make sure we inspect the seat belt. And I'm just looking for any damage or debris on the seat belt. I'm also going to look down on the housing and look at the installation date. And one thing that we recommend is replacing our seatbelt 3 years from date of installation. And the reason that is the environment. Things in the air will break down the integrity of the fabric as well as sunlight. So we want to make sure that we keep inspecting that seatbelt and we keep it up to date. So that way, if we do have an accident, that seatbelt's going to do its job and it's going to hold me into the seat. So now we'll go ahead and we're hooked up. We're going to adjust our seat. We're going to make sure we feel good, ready to go to work. We'll turn the key or the switch on. We're going to watch it roll through the systems. The gauges are going to go up. They're going to drop back down. Blowers are going to come on. Everything sounds good. So we'll go ahead and start the machine up now. It did its systems check. Go ahead and turn the radio down. All right. Now, let's do a quick roll through on this machine before we go to work. Okay, looking at the B panel over here, I've got my left-right turn signals if we were running around site. We have lights, we have headlights, we have side lights, okay? So all of our lights are right here in the B panel. Now as I roll through, I have my beacon light. I can turn my beacon light on, extra safety precaution as it's running. This guy right here that looks like the engine and the engine crankshaft. This says right pedal lock. basically it says disabled. I turn it on. That is enabled. This is where we're going to set throttle lock and use everything from our left pedal. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Right here is ride control. I can run ride control in automatic, or I can have it off. Okay. Typically, ride control around the transfer station or MRF, we don't get going as fast enough for it to be enabled in the automatic mode. So typically, we'll leave the ride control off. Once again, depends on each individual site and what we have going on there. Here's our horsepower. We have two standard power modes. We have standard, and then we have the performance. This is our rim pull adjustment. We'll talk a little bit more about rim pull, but I can adjust right here. I can hold this button down. Number one, if I hit it, I can disable it, or I can enable it. And when I want to enable it, I hold that down, and now it's going to pop up into the screen. And this is going to allow me to adjust my rim pull from 100% down to 50%. So basically, that's my torque to the ground. And once again, we'll talk a little bit more later, but as I look at the environment that I'm in a transfer station, slippery floor, concrete floor, a lot of trash juice all over the floor. So when I go into a pile, I run that risk that I'm going to spin tires very easily. So if it's a really slippery floor, I can adjust that rim pull down to 50%. I can put it at 55, 60. I can do it in 5% increments, but I can specifically adjust that rim pull to the type of floor environment that I have that day. So we're going to leave it right there at 70%. Now coming down below it, that is our upper and lower kickouts. I can hold it to set it. So that's basically, if I want to set a certain height when I'm truck loading and I know I'm not going to go any higher, so I can take my bucket, say that's all the higher I want to go. Now I can hold that down. Just heard the beep. So now that says now when I come back and I hit my detent, so say I got my bucket full, I come back, take that out, it's going to take me back to that preset height that I just set it at. Now we're going to go down to the ground here. I'm going to raise it up just a little bit, about 4 inches off the ground there. I'm going to hit it again. So now I just set my lower kick out. So once again, here's my upper. There it goes, stopped. And now I push forward. And that's going to take me back to that preset lower limit. Now, I know I'm about 4 inches off the ground. So now as I go back to it, I can just briefly lower to the ground. Now I know I'm on the ground. So I'm not putting all that down pressure on there either. And it's quick for me to get back to that same spot. And then I can just ease into that position on the floor. Now when I look at my return to dig, what we call it, or getting our bucket back level. So I raise up. Now I'm going to dump. I just dumped in the truck. Now I'm going to come back. So you can see how that brings my bucket all the way tilted back. Now, one thing we can do, I'll roll forward, because I always want to go into the pile level. So I'm going to bring the bucket down to the ground. I'm going to lift up just a little bit, and then we're going to, because one thing that I'm looking at right here is I'm looking at the top part of my bucket down. And on each end, you can see that flat steel that's right there on each end. That is directly in line with my cutting edge. So basically, I'm looking at that, trying to get an eyeball there to let me know that that's straight across. So that's going to tell me my bucket is now flat and level to the ground. So when I go into a pile of trash, I'm going in even, and then I can manipulate the bucket to load. So now that I have that set, now I'm going to take this return to dig button. I'm going to hold it down. Now, I heard the beep, so I just set it. So, we go to our upper kick out. Now I'm going to push forward. I'm going to dump. I just dumped. Now I'm going to come back to my kick out. And that's going to take me back to being level. So now when I hit my button there for my lower kick out, now I just feather it down on the ground. Now I know I'm going straight in that pile. I know that pile and that cutting edge is perfectly flat and level with the ground. So when I go into that pile, I'm going in even. And now all I got to do is rack back a little bit and manipulate that bucket to fill that bucket up with the trash so I can get another bucket full and go into the truck. So those are all the buttons on the B panel. Now the buttons down here below. These are our payload buttons down here. So we have our button for the zero to zero out our bucket. Here on this one we have our load. Now as I look at my controls, we've already talked about them. Everything on my left hand is all my travel. I've got forward and reverse. I have left right steer. And then I have my rocker switch for my speed control. So basically if I hold it down like that real far, then that's going to change my speeds from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Or if I just want to give it a quick bump, and I can do it in half speed increments, or I can do it in tenths increments as well. So once again, we can dial that speed in as we find what works for us as I'm running in the transfer station. Park brake, hydraulic lock, we have our hazards, we have our heated windows, and then this one here is if I want to adjust my windows too. Safety being of the utmost importance when we're in the transfer station or on any job site. So now having control over my windows to give me good visibility behind and being able to adjust those on the fly gives me an extra safety precaution. We've never really had those before in the past. We'd have to get out there and have somebody stand out on the shelf and turn that mirror to where I got good visibility. Now I can control that just like my car from sitting inside the cab here. Okay. Now as I pick up, say we want to run throttle lock, right? So we talked about that. We talked about our rim pull, all that dialed in. So I'm going to hold down on my throttle. Hit that button, hold it down on the bottom. And now you can see I'm running 1400 RPMs, full RPMs, and it's all, I don't have to get on or off the throttle. So we're running throttle lock. Now that I have throttle lock set, what I want to do is now set my speed. Right now we'll just go ahead and set our speed at 2.0. And now as I go forward or reverse, now I can do all my speed modulation from right here with the left pedal. So you can see I've got no throttle. I can go very slow, or I can open it up and go very fast. But I'm doing all that from the left pedal. A lot more efficient for the operator, a lot more comfortable for the operator. Very, very fast on the fore and aft, shifting back and forth. Just a smooth ride overall for the operator inside the cab. So we're going to go ahead and lower our bucket. We're going to go ahead and put our park brake on. Now, let's roll through the monitor and some of the things that are available to us on the monitor. We do have payload. We'll talk more about payload later on. But as I'm loading trucks throughout the day, I can get a good idea, right? We want to be efficient as we load trucks. So I don't want to send the trucks down the road 2 to 3 tons short every time. So payload's going to be good, so I know exactly how much weight I'm putting into that truck. And then another thing is, if he leaves the transfer station, he goes out to the scale and he's too heavy, then he's got to come back in, and we got to pull some material out. That's very inefficient as well, because then we got too much, or if we don't catch it, we have too much, and we get stopped by the police out on the highway. Now we got a fine because we're overweight. So we need to make sure we want to hit that proper weight every time. This system here, the payload system, is going to allow me to hit that target weight every time. So let's roll through our monitor. Operator controls tab. So this is giving me an overall layout as to what each one of these controls are. Select any item on the right for more information. So it's basically pulling everything out of the OMM. So once again, as we went through everything here, if you still got a question, I can pull these controls up. I hit right here, right pedal lock. That tells me it's 5D. And then it tells me exactly what the right pedal lock does. Refer to the OMM, operator control, steering, transmission, diff lock. This is basically right out of the OMM. Okay, so we're getting that OMM inside that monitor. Here's the operator's manual. So once again, the forward, the safety section. Let's hit the safety section. Let's see what we got. Safety messages, additional messages, general hazard information, crushing prevention. So 966XE wheel loader, safety messages. Now I can scroll through. There are no specific safety messages on this machine. The exact location of the hazards and the description of the hazards are reviewed in this section. Become familiarized with all safety messages. So once again, can't stress enough about going back and looking at the OMM and learning everything there is to know about this machine. But not only do we give you the hard copy now we're going to put it in the monitor. So if you got a specific question and we want to go right into the monitor, I can pull that operation and maintenance manual up and get exactly what I'm looking for, or learn more about the about this machine. Key features: you got the CAT payload system we talked about. We got tip-off manual overview. We have application profiles. Basically, the application profiles are, I can go through and set specific settings to what I like as the operator. And then the next time I get in this machine, I can go back to that specific application profile and it's going to take me right back to those same settings. We have advanced payload we can go to. Here's our settings. Here's the application profiles we talked about. Select profile. Roading, truck loading, load and carry. So operator requested forward machine limit 16 miles an hour. Operator requested reverse machine. So I can go in and set these specifically if I want to change something, and then it's going to go back to that same setting as I decide, that's the one I want to run. So here's where we can set our implement control. Now, we already talked about that, right? Our upper and lower kickouts modulation. So we have our raise enabled, we have our lower enabled, we have the rack back enabled, we have the dump enabled. So those are all the kickouts that I can set and that we've already ran through and set. Modulation, I have normal and fine. Basically, this is normal speed on my hydraulics. Or if I'm in a little bit of a precise environment, maybe I don't want to go as fast, I can change that and I can put it at fine modulation. Basically, that's going to slow me down just a little bit. Oops. I can change the dump rate. So we have that enabled. Snubbing. We have our raise enabled. We have all that enabled. So that's the snubbing that's going to keep me from deadheading the cylinder. So when I come all the way up and then I deadhead that cylinder and then the machine vibrates back and shakes back and forth. No reason to really, in this environment and waste, we don't necessarily need to have that disabled. I would leave the snubbing enabled. That way it's less wear and tear on the machine. It's also less wear and tear on the operator because I'm not jerking that machine back and forth when I deadhead those cylinders. Reversing fan, powertrain speed range. So let's do that. So our powertrain speed range, I can set it. This is set at 2.0 forward, 1.5 in reverse. Reverse, we probably don't want to go as fast in reverse, especially in this environment. because of the smaller areas. So we can kick our reverse down, meaning now all we're going to do is be able to go no more than 1.0 in reverse speed wise. Reversing fan. If it's more dusty in a particular day in this environment, we can turn around and go in and do a manual purge and reverse the fan and blow out that radiator. So once again, depending on the day it is, what type of trash flow is coming in, things of that nature. All right, let's go to our service. Diagnostics is probably going to be the other big thing that you want to look at. This is, once again, we'll go through and tell us any codes that are going to pop up on that machine. When I start getting a code, it's going to come up in that diagnostics. So now as I'm starting to have a problem, I can go right into the diagnostics. This said seatbelt was unfastened. Tells me exactly when it happened. First time was 212.5. The last time was 298.2. So now I can go in, look at that. Number one, that'll go into Vision Link and be reported. Also, if I need to call the mechanic, if I'm having a problem, I can call the mechanic right away and say, hey, here's the code that I have. Here's what it's telling me. It's a level 1, it's a level 2, it's a level 3. But it's telling me what's happening in that monitor from that diagnostics tab. Planned maintenance. 500-hour service is due in 199 hours. So once again, this is keeping track of our planned maintenance, our 500-hour service, our 750, our 1,000-hour. We can do our payload calibration, simple calibration. It's going to run through. We can calibrate very easily through the monitor. Okay, so back to the monitor and let's talk about brake checks and the steering test and the park brake test. So as you remember, all of our CAT equipment, we have a procedure to check those functions before we go to work, and that procedure was always in the OMM. So now, for example, what it used to be is on most of the wheel loaders used to be third gear forward, foot on the service brake, foot on the throttle, full RPMs, and the brake should hold. On an 836 compactor, should be second gear forward, foot on the service brake, foot on the throttle to 1,000 RPMs, and it should hold. So those are the tests that we'd use to check the brakes. Now, on this particular machine, and as the newer machines, we actually have it in the monitor. So as I go through and I look at service test, I have steering test. And so basically I'm going to hit that button and I see the green lights. And basically the machine right now is conducting its steering test. Button will be active while the test is running. We're good there. Park brake test. This gives me all the steps involved to do the parking brake test. So basically, what it's going to tell me to do, I read through it, the machine begins to move during the test. It's aborted. Test may be aborted any time. I'm going to hit OK. Now, it's going to tell me, hit OK to start. All right. Test conditions. Transmission warmed up, raise the implement off the ground. We did that. Move the direction, switch to the neutral position. We're in neutral. Fully release the throttle pedal. We were off the throttle pedal, so we're good. Apply the park brake. Now we just applied the park brake. Now we need to hit continue. Now, while the park brake is engaged, cycle the direction switch to forward, back to neutral, and back to forward again to engage the transmission. Forward, back to neutral, forward. Now, release the throttle, immediately move the direction, switch to neutral, and engage the service brake. That's if we had a problem. We didn't move, so now we're good to go. So, now we'll go ahead and abort that. We'll hit the service brake. And we'll once again go through the steps involved in the service brake and check those at the same time. Press OK to start. Release the park brake. Fully depress the brake pedal. Release the park brake. And we'll go ahead and hit the next. Click the next button. So we have the park brake disengaged, transmission temp. Okay, so as everybody knows, we've always had a procedure to test our brakes, test our brake accumulators, to test the steering on any of the wheel loaders that have secondary steering in case of an emergency. And we could always find that procedure right out of the OMM. So for example, it used to be wheel loaders, third gear forward, full RPMs, and it should hold. If I was in a landfill compactor like an 836, it would be second gear forward, foot on the throttle. It should hold up to 1,000 RPMs and the brake should hold. Those were procedures to test our brakes, our accumulators, and our steering. I could always get that right out of the OMM. Now, we come right out of the, it's in the monitor now. So I can hit this button. I can then turn around and hit that again. It's doing a steering test right now to ensure that secondary steering is functional if I need it in that situation. We can go ahead and get out of that. Park brake gives me step by step on how to test the park brake. I can read it, park the machine on the ground, make sure the machine's clear of personnel. Machine begins to move during the test or is aborted, release the throttle pedal. Test may be aborted at any time. I can hit OK, and then it's going to give me the OK and say press OK to start. So it's going to give me a step by step walking through. Same with the service brake. Basically, I'm going to roll through that. It's going to give me the step-by-step. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to press OK to start. It's going to tell me what I need to do. Put my foot on the service brake. It's going to tell me, it's going to automatically raise the RPMs. It's going to tell me to put it in gear. It's going to tell me to take it out of gear. So it's going to check that system for me. And it's also going to log that. So we know when we are checking that system to make sure everything's good to go on the brake test. So once again, do those brake tests, look in the monitor or the OMM, find out how often we should be doing it. Once a month. Here in the monitor, we can do it a lot more often now too. You know, and it might make it easy to go through and do that test through the monitor. Okay. Now, as I'm looking around, I've got cat detect in this machine too. So another feature that we have in this machine is cat detect for personnel. So basically, I'm looking at my monitor and the screen here. I can see on the screen, I got 360 view. I've got a guy walking behind the machine now. And now I can see him. I got a yellow flashing light. Now it goes to red as he gets closer and directly behind me. So I can see him on the right side. You can see the lights and the distance it's giving me. Also that 360 view around that machine. So I can see on each side where he's at. I could also see him come across in the camera angle on the left side where I'm closer and I've got my lines for my depth perception to see where he's at. So that's cat detect. So this is another great safety feature as far as the technology that's put on the machine. So when I'm inside that transfer station, and when I think of the transfer station, very chaotic environment, a lot of moving parts. I've got trucks. I've got people walking around. I've got other machines running around. I have several different things happening as well. So to have something like this in the cab that's going to give me an alarm and alert me when somebody's behind me, we can't even put a price tag on that. Because when we think about safety and think about everyone going home the same way they came to work with all their fingers, all their toes, Safely home, everyone, every day. That's what makes us, what we shoot for in the transfer station, success, right? If I can send everybody home the same way they came to work, with all their fingers, all their toes, hey, you know what? We're doing good. Everything else, small potatoes, but sending everyone home the same way they came to work, that's what we want. So any technology that we can have on the machine to get us to that point, I'm going to take it every time. But once again, very easily visible to me as I sit in this seat, very much giving me full visibility of this machine and around, and thinking about those blind spots that are in the machine as well. I just eliminated those blind spots that are typically on that machine from when I'm sitting in the operator's cab. So great to have. So with that being said, we're just about ready to go to work and start loading out trucks. But a couple of things I want to recap. Number one, reading the OMM and understanding the OMM and understanding the machine. The more I know about this machine, the easier it is that it's going to be for me to be safe. Okay, so once again, I want to make sure that I know everything I can about this machine. Take the time, read the OMM. I've got the hard copy of the OMM behind the seat. I also now have the OMM inside this particular monitor where I can go to it. Another thing we want to think about, keeping the cab clean. No loose items in the cab. Once again, we've talked about it before. Water bottles could fall out on the floor, end up underneath the pedal. If I were to have an accident, I've got loose items in the cab, they could start to fly around and become a projectile and hit me as I'm operating and cause injury that way. So I want to make sure I'm keeping the cab clean. And then the other thing is just knowing some of the safety features of the technology and understand how to work it. We talked about the Cat Detect. Some other things too as far as the machine goes, lighting. As I'm out doing a walk around or trying to get up and clean my windows. Knowing the steps, where they're at, and knowing where the handhelds are, and being able to hold on to or tie off to keep me from falling off the machine, so I can get out there and clean my windows or remove debris from the machine to keep any fires from happening as that machine, that debris gets inside those vital components of the machine. So once again, all this stuff built with the operator in mind and safety in mind, keeping everybody safe on the job site. That's what it's all about. It's about keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody from getting hurt. So we're ready to go to work. Let's go move some trash.